think it's time to take my car out for a drive. It's been a while. You know, you work on these cars and all of a sudden you realize you haven't taken your own car out for a drive in a while. So I figure it's time. So here we go. Just gonna take a quick spin. Always good to get things warmed up a little bit. And we could talk about some of the projects that are going on. So today, I'm working on suspension for the 330. It's doing a full restoration. Yeah, I have a 330 that I have to go and do the nasty job of pulling the suspension apart. So this morning, before it gets hot, I take the car out for a quick spin. And then I'll get back to work on the suspension. Hello? Hey, what's up? I have to pull this 330 suspension bushings out. These are the pivots that go inside the A-arms, or the pivots on the A-arms. And before I start detailing the undercarriage and rebuilding the suspension and all that other stuff, I have to pull the old bushings out. So I just used simple threaded rod and some sockets, and they should come right out. So I'm going to bring you along to do that. Well, I'm pulling out the bushing. These pivots have a fiber type material bushing in here, and it's it wears out, and it just has to be removed. Basically, the pivots of the A-arms ride up and down on these bushings, but the new replacement ones are brass, so they're a little harder than these, and should be a little bit long wearing. These look okay, but I'm sure through the years they're soft and they wear out. So they got to be pressed out first. And what I did was I already pulled the bottom one out. And basically what you do is you have to kind of press them out or pull them out. I found the easier way, and I'll show you how I do it. I just get a threaded rod and I put some sockets in there that are the same dimension as this bushing. So it catches it and pushes it out through the, you have two of them on either side. Because they're soft, what'll happen is there's a sleeve inside that'll catch on, and then I just keep pushing and push the other one out. And if the one of them gets destroyed, it gets destroyed because it's easier to just push it all the way through than it is to try to pull them out from the outside, you know, which I'll see if this makes any sense once I get this thing started. And it's really a messy job. I mean, I almost contemplated not shooting this because trying to get a camera in here and filming it with all this grease and dirt can really be a mess. But I think I set up the camera, and so I think you could just follow along, and as long as I don't have to touch anything. So, but it'll give you a better idea how this works. It's just trying to get grip on this nut, on this grit. It's kind of a challenge. But anyway, it'll pull through, and then I can get most of it out on this one pull, and then have to reset it with a collar. I think sometimes explaining it is one thing, and sometimes just doing it and showing it is just a lot easier. Let's see if it'll start here. All right, so once I get it started, it'll start pulling that one bushing on this end, and it'll start pulling it through. It'll slowly pull it through. I can just feel it coming to the end of it. All right, and then what happens is I kind of have to pull this out because it's already pulled the first collar. So basically the first one has pulled through, and now it's just kind of rattling around inside. You know, just get this thing to turn a little greasy. Not really, it's not enough. Then what I do is I get this nut off, take this washer out because that was what was pulling it against, and I got this piece of tubing that I put onto there. It'll allow the bushing to come through. I just got a piece of scrap from my scrap pile, get that there, line this up, put this nut back on, and basically what I try to do is get this kind of line up the socket that's on the other side. It should start right up here. You feel it start pulling, and probably what it's doing is cracking the first one because that's not lined up perfectly, but it should start. Yeah, you can feel it breaking the other one inside, and eventually what will happen is it'll line up the socket with the other one, hopefully. Let's see if we can get this thing. I might have to pull it out. Keep turning. Let's see, keep turning. Keep turning. Don't feel too much. Turn this off. Turn the socket. I should just melt the other nut on there. I might get the other socket. Okay, almost there. Just making sure that it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. So once I get these bushings out, I'm going to degrease everything, and then we'll start painting the chassis, get everything cleaned up a little bit. It was painted, but it just covered in dust and sanding slurry and all that other stuff. So I'm going to clean it up and paint it if it needs to be. But that's basically how I pull these bushings out. You can see there's that bushing popped out. The other one is still kind of inside. So I just got to get the socket out. See if we can get the socket out this way. There's one socket, and there's the other socket. And then inside is just pieces of the other bushing that's just basically crushed. See, that's all just broken apart. And I just gotta fish out the other pieces. I got a little hook here. There's another piece. Just a big greasy mess. I mean, this is all just grease from years and years. And all the little pieces of bushing I'm pulling out too. I can feel little shards of bushing in there. But once I clean out, get some paper towels and clean out the inside here, it'll be a lot better. This one's basically done too. You know, so I did all of them, and now it's time to clean up all this junk. But yeah, pretty nasty stuff. I'm starting to put the front suspension together on this 330. It's a lot of teeny tiny little pieces. Cleaned off a lot of it, and you know, it's a lot of pieces, a lot of washers, cleaning and making sure. Some of this stuff I have to send out for plating. Some of it I think it looks pretty good. It just needs to be cleaned up. Some of it I'm going to put on, you know, I have black oxide here at the shop. I could just do that. What I am replacing though is these brass bushings. The original ones, when I took them out, are the fiber washes that you saw, and to replace them with the brass is certainly a lot more durable, and they'll go in, but I have to press them in. I also have all the suspension arms are nickel plated, so those have been done for a while. So once I start, it's going to be another step is to start pushing these things in. But like I said, first step after the cleaning was to put the big bushings in on the body side. These are the pivots. So I've cleaned out the grease fittings in there and cleaned out the holes to make sure that it all greases, and cleaned off. These look like they're gonna clean up fine. What I did replace were the outside pivot pivots, because they were pretty rotted, or not rotted, but rusty, and a lot of water got in there and damaged them. So I just got new pins. These will be a lot easier to put in, but the main ones here are pretty good. They're the ones that'll slide into this, but after I install them, I have to ream them. So I have a reamer here that I'll take it out later. have a reamer here that will ream them once I have the press it in. So the first step here is to press these bushings in to the into the car, and then we'll go on to the next step. To install these bushings, it's actually not that hard. You just kind of get that started, and you start like this. Threaded rod is all you need. You just basically have to thread it through and then it pulls through. So what I'll show you, just goes right in there like that. Get a couple washers here. Just want to make sure it starts straight. A little ungainly until it gets tension, so it's going to get this kind of going. That's it. So we make sure that it's starting straight so it doesn't get cocked in there. Looks like it's starting. And we'll just kind of start drawing it in. Move the light out of the way a little bit. Now what happens is, the reason why it's got to be reamed is because dimensionally, as this thing gets pressed in, and you see how tight it is, it's going to change in dimension a little bit. So what the reamer does is the reamer just makes sure that it is exactly the same diameter as the pin that goes through it. So that way everything moves. Because if I tried to put that pin in now, it'll be really tight and bind. So you have to check it with the reamer to get it so everything pivots correctly. And I just gotta get this nice and tight to make sure that bushing bottomed out. We'll pull this out just to check. Yep, looks nice and flush. Great. So just got to do that several more times. But that's how you press those brass sleeves in. With all 8 bushings installed, 4 on a side, ready for the the next step. But so here's the deal: if you try to slide the pivot in, it won't fit, because these bushings, even though they're sized for this, when you press them in, they're going to change in dimension slightly because it's a snug fit to get them in. So what you have to do is the next step is to ream it. Just what it does is it just takes a little bit of the brass material out, and that'll make this thing pivot really nicely and fit perfectly. So that's the next step, is to ream these bushings. Okay. So it's just a long process here. Let's see if I can put this light somewhere where it's not like constantly in the way. There, how's that? That's better. So from what I understand, a reamer should only be turned in one direction, because it's supposed to, you're not supposed to back a reamer out. So it only goes clockwise direction, even when pulling it out. You know, the tendency I have is to thread it out, but I was told by an old timer that that will ruin a reamer, because the cutting edge will develop a will get a ridge on it, or it'll get a burr on it, and that will ruin the reamer. So from what I understand, that's the only direction you're supposed to go in. If you think that that's an old machinist wives' tale, let me know in the comments, but I've always been told you should only turn a reamer in one direction. So as I'm cutting this out and I'm putting a little bit of pressure in, I'm also going to turn in the same direction to pull it out. Okay, so the reamer's all the way through, and you can see how it chipped out or cut away just a little hair, or hairs, you know, of brass. So that's why you run the reamer through. So it's just increased the hole by maybe 20 thousandths or so, or 10 thousandths, and that will and then I still need to hone it, because I still, what you'll see is even after reaming, this is still, you can just feel like it's starting to go in, but I need to just refine it a little bit more. I get a honing stone and I put it in here and I hone the hole out a little bit better. But the reamer at least makes sure that it's dead straight, so both of these bushings are exactly straight across. What I'm going to do is I'll clean up the reamer and then I'll do the bottom one. Well, the next step is to put these pivots. These are the A-arm pivots. I've already pressed out the old bushings and pressed in the new ones, but just like the other ones on the pivots, they don't fit because they need to be sized. It's just a few thousandths off. You could just see it starting to go in, but it needs to be cut with the reamer, which again I will get my reamer that's sized to this to this piece, and that will get these things to slide well. So once they're in, they turn really nicely. You get that fitted in, but you just have to get it so it slides in perfectly. And the way those pivots go is they go on the A-arms. So I'm starting to assemble the A-arms here, but all the pieces just need to be pressed in, and once you get that pressed in and honed out a little bit, that pivot goes in really nicely. So once everything goes in, then everything doesn't bind, nothing, you know, if you can imagine if this isn't fitted correctly, and you just hammer this thing in, it will bind up in the suspension. That's what's the point of doing it if you're not going to do it right. So we're going to remount the center on this. So try not to get it to chatter, but slowly getting this thing in, and to get it to go through both of those bushings and cut. Just taking a little bit of material out, but that's all it takes. And then once I get the main chips out, I will put I will run a little hone in there, and it will it'll bring the last few tenths of thousandths out, and then that'll let it slide. But gotta cut the main material out with this guy. And make sure again that both bushings are cut and aligned. Is it all the way through? Yep, it's all the way through. That's great. So some of these, they don't line up all the way through, and you can feel a little ridge that has to be cut. But this one seems to be going through pretty well. Going all the way through, so then I can just pull this out. Just to go to show you, each one of them is slightly different. Like one of them I had to cut, it seemed to cut a ton of material out. This one seemed like it didn't cut much at all. But it was enough for the pin not to want to come out, so. And you could see how much, you know, little chips of brass. Just on a little side note, these things are super sharp little needles, so you kind of have to really be careful around these things, or you'll end up with these things poking you at some point in your clothes. So then the next step, what I'll do is I have like a little hone, and I'll clean this out a little bit. We'll put a little bit of cutting oil in there, and I'll just sneak this hone in here. And we'll just cut out a little bit. Oh, battery just went dead. So let's see if this fits. It's getting there. See how it fits with the one on the bottom. No, it's still a little tight. I'm going to take a little bit more off of it. You can see that it'll go through, but it's just a little tight. So I'm going to just hone it a little bit more. My honing stones are really just about at the very end. I've got another one coming in that, but this one's getting really close to being worn out. A lot of honing with these things, so I will, I think I'm really close to the very last bit of it. The new one should be coming in any day now, so. When I accidentally go too far. All right. that should be pretty good. I mean, it doesn't take much. It's just a little bit, but can't take too much out because you can't put it back. Oh yeah, there you go. See, now that goes in by hand, so that way, no hammering. You can see just that couple thousandths, couple of tenths probably, of thousandths is all it takes. So this one's done. On to the next one. Look how beautiful that goes. Love that feeling. And it just, once you put grease in there, it'll work great. See, now this one is not as well aligned because you can feel it. It's not, it's cutting, but it's not as smooth. But as the cutter cuts more, there it goes. It just cut the ridge off that I was looking for. And now it's going all the way through. Because there's 2 bushings in there. And as it got to the second one, the cutter head was just starting to touch it. So it took a little bit of cutting and now it's cut through. I can feel it. Yep, it's all the way through. And it's not chattering or making that noise anymore. So that means it's cutting nice little grooves in there. And the teeth that are following through are doing a good shape. So now, try to pull it out. Same thing, pulling it out as I'm turning it clockwise because I don't want to ruin the cutting blades. All right, so you can see all that cutting out. Clean my cutter out. Clean this off. Now, as you can see, if I put the pin in even after cutting, it's still, you can still hear it's trying to make it in. Oh, it's getting there. But then the bottom one starts to get stuck. So, like I said, we're just gonna hone it out a little bit. All it takes is just a little bit of a hone. See if I got one more run on this toning stone. Nope, I gotta go all the way through. Like I said, once it goes through, kind of have to push it all the way through. Very hard for it to come back through. Because once the tips splay out, it's very hard for it to get back through the ridge, so you kind of have to push it all the way through. I think I just need a little bit more on the top one, and I think we should be in pretty good shape. just, feels pretty good. All right, so that one's done too. All right.